you get to a point and you realize logistically, yes, you still want to say yes, but your business isn't going to be scalable if you're saying yes to everything.
Have you ever met someone and thought their job sounded cool? Or perhaps you're wondering how you can get to a position that doesn't seem to match any of the qualifications you have at the moment. Well, if so, this podcast is for you.
We found some people with jobs that you might not necessarily know about or expect people to have, and we're going to ask them about how they got there.
Welcome to What Do They Do? A podcast about jobs and how people got them. So this week, we're joined by Holly Daniels-Christensen, an entrepreneur that we're going to find out more about as we work through today's episode. We don't want to give too much away, as always, but massive thanks for joining us this week, Holly. We're really glad to have you with us.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome to the podcast.
And we'll kick off with a really simple question that we ask everybody that comes on, which is, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a veterinarian. I wanted to be a veterinarian because I love animals. I loved animals, although I just happened to not be very good in science. So that was a little bit of a problem. But because of my love for animals, I really wanted to be a veterinarian or be in some sort of care role for animals.
And how did that play out when you were younger? What happened? Tell us a bit about when you were at school. Did that stick with you? Did you change your mind as you went through? Were you heading in that direction?
Sure. I actually was. I worked since I was 11 years old. I worked at a farm in Brewster, Massachusetts called Bassett Wild Animal Farm. It's no longer there, but it was this small zoo where I would take care of animals we had lions, we had tigers, monkeys, goats, chickens, horses, it ran the whole gamut of types of animals. And I worked there every summer from when I was 11. And I remember I made $5 a day for hustling 8-hour days, cleaning and feeding. But I made $5 a day and I worked there every summer until I was 18. And when I left, I was making $5 an hour at 18. So I really worked my way up the ranks.
Did you grow up with animals in the house as well?
I did. Yeah. My mother was a huge animal lover. We had horses and chickens and goats. I used to milk goats. We would sell the goat milk to people way back before it was even trendy, right? Before people knew about whether what the benefits were and things like that. So that was fun.
My 9-year-old son would be so jealous. He's really, really loves animals too. We've got some chickens in the garden and a cat, but we haven't managed to find him access to that many animals yet. But we have put out a call to a few people who've got local farms and things just to see, do you want someone that can come and muck out some stables? Because he would be willing. Trickier at the moment because he's got a broken leg, but he's a kindred spirit, very much so.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think for me, it was really good. It teaches really hard work. It teaches you that there's something greater than you, especially if you're working around horses who are so big and so powerful, and you are meant to, you have to respect them right away, or else they're not going to respect you, and things can happen around a barn or a farm. So I think it's good for kids. My girls are actually at horse camp today, and they're doing pretty good with it. So,
what does horse camp involve?
Pretty much what Ben was just saying. They're mucking stalls. They do get to ride, but they're still pretty little. Lila is 6 years old. Lexa is 8 years old. And this is their first real interaction with big animals like that. So, but right away they're doing barn chores. They're lugging hay, all of that stuff, which I just think it's so important these days to learn how to work hard for something that you want. Because, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, so many young kids and teenagers just have never had to. There's been no need for them to work. And I think that sometimes can bleed into adult life.
And you mentioned there that you were effectively doing work from age 11, I think you said, through to when you were 18 there. And was that alongside being at school? How did that work? How did you fit it in?
So I worked every summer until I moved out of my house when I was 15. I was still going to high school, but I would work after school, and I've essentially been supporting myself since I was 15, which is unusual. And those are unusual circumstances. I don't recommend that to anyone. But I've worked ever since then. But the cool thing about that is I've worked for so many people and done so many things that it really that experience kind of lent itself to being a pretty good entrepreneur.
Because obviously we'll get to your more recent entrepreneurial journey in time, but I get the impression then that you've definitely found a lot of the skills that you picked up through that sort of childhood working environment has definitely come back to benefit you in what you're doing now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think there's a lot to be said about emotional intelligence. And when you're young and you're working for people like that and working multiple jobs, not just for fun, but also to support yourself, I think you really do soak in a lot of emotional intelligence. Like you innately learn emotional intelligence somehow, and how to read people and how to get along with people. And I think that has definitely been something that's helped me throughout my life.
So after sort of thinking about becoming a veterinarian and then going through the process of high school, it sounds like circumstances sort of took you away from that. What was the change? Was there a time when you saw that veterinarian dream sort of moving to the side, and what replaced it? And what was the process of kind of high school and beyond high school?
Yeah, I think I always kind of approach life with some common sense and understanding of circumstances. And so when I was in high school, I just I didn't like science. It was not my thing. I loved history and I loved English, but science and math were not something that I was passionate about. And I knew when I couldn't really did not want to dissect the frog in school. And I know a lot of people have stories about that. I really couldn't do it. Right there, I'm like, okay, so maybe I'll be a dolphin trainer. Like, your brain starts kind of spinning when you realize there are some things that you're not willing to do, and maybe you're not going to be good at, which is okay, because everyone's good at something. I truly believe that. And I also believe you just because you're passionate about something doesn't mean it should be your career. Find something you're good at. Make that be your career, because that's where you're going to find success. Sometimes passion doesn't lend itself to a successful career. And you've got to find, in my opinion, you have to find a balance.
Taking a step back there, when you were 18 and you left the job, what was your first kind of full-time job then at that point that you went into?
God. So it's like a trip down memory lane. And some of it is like, you're just kind of like, oh my God, I did that. My first job was managing a bagel shop. So it was in hospitality. And because I grew up on Cape Cod, which has a really robust tourism season during the summer. And so I left the farm, and I went and at this point, right, I was out on my own. I didn't really quite have a plan. I didn't have money for school or a support system to go to university or college. So I'm like, I'm going to get a job. So I started at the counter at this bagel shop and kind of worked my way up into basically running the entire operation by the time I was 20. And they were expanding into another location, and actually cut me in on equity in the second location at that point. And I really got into it. I think I tend to find I'm one of those people who can find kind of excitement and joy in most situations. And so I got really into the marketing of Bagelport, is what it was called. And and the menu creation and the sourcing. And I liked it. It was good. And I learned a lot from the people who owned it. They were very young themselves. And I remember looking at the wife, Martina, every day and how she conducted she conducted herself with people. And she could light up a room. Like, people would walk through the front door of the bagel shop and it would just be like, good morning. And so authentic and so real that she just wanted to know how they were and how are their kids and what's going on at work. And like, she just was a beacon of light. And I really took that to heart, thinking how special she makes people feel, and wanted to always make people feel that same way.
It's really interesting you've flagged a particular person. We found throughout all of the podcast episodes that there's been a few pivotal people along the way that really help people, whether it was a bit of advice or whether it's like you yourself sort of seeing someone go about their day in a way that kind of inspired you. And clearly it stuck with you. You remember that as a vivid memory.
And I should also call out her sister, Mia, who was also the same amount of amazing. And I loved how family oriented they were, where I was an only child and moved out of my house at 15. Just having someone working with and for someone with such deep family roots and such positivity was pivotal for sure. I don't know where I'd be if I hadn't met them.
And how long, it's amazing that you went from working the counter to managing the store in a matter of a couple of years, right? How long did you stick around and do that for?
5 years.
And then did you stay in retail from there? Did you pivot to something else again? So
I actually, there was a customer from the bagel shop who was like, I think I had taken on that persona of being like bright and happy and energetic. And he was like, I want to teach you how to bartend. I was like, I've heard bartenders make really good money. So I thought, why not? Like, here I am at that point, 25, 24, actually. I think it overlapped a little bit. I was younger. Sure. So then I learned how to bartend, which of course at that age, you're making amazing money, a young girl hustling and really knowing how to make drinks, knowing how to wait on people, customer service was good. And again, on Cape Cod, you have that seasonal tourism that really brings in big bucks. And I learned a lot from that as well. I learned a lot from that, just managing people's personalities and what their needs are, because it's certainly different from when they come in at 7 a.m. for their bagel to when they come in for their shot of whiskey at 11:30. It's just a whole different situation, right? So definitely took a lot away from bartending as well. And again, worked my way up to manage the bar.
It sounds like, in a similar way I've heard Dean talk about it, that you just make yourself useful and invaluable, and you just did you end up finding yourself managing these places without necessarily saying, in 3 years' time, I'm going to manage this place?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's in my nature, and I don't know exactly where the work ethic came from, but it's always been there. Almost to a fault now that I have children, but if you're constantly vigilant about managing your family's expectations and trying to find balance, I think it's a good thing. I'm all for the workaholics out there, okay?
Those sort of jobs are so important as you're growing up, for getting you a bit of confidence and just kind of making you...
You're going to love the next one, Ben. You're going to really love the next one.
So what was next? You've gone from bagels to bartending. What's the next job that you found yourself in?
One of my bar regulars, and I cannot remember his name, I wish I could, said, you know what, Holly, you would be amazing in sales. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And he worked for Quirk Ford, and got me into selling cars.
I see.
Which there's such a stigma here in the U.S. I don't know if it's the same in the U.K., about selling cars, but I'll tell you, you guys, I learned a lot. I learned that sales is simply overcoming obstacles. It's adding value. It's being knowledgeable. It's being setting yourself apart from the other salespeople by being so knowledgeable. I learned a lot. The hours were horrific. I mean, it was like not horrific. You know, when you're an entrepreneur, you're working 100 hours a week anyway, but you're doing it for yourself. Whereas when you're selling cars, it's just like really a lot. It's like 60 hours a week, and you know, one person's up and then the next person's up, and I'm sure it's changed. I mean, this was years ago, so I'm sure it's changed a bit. But I did work my way from car salesperson up to the finance manager. So that was interesting. So as you know, now that I'm actually speaking about it, it's like clicking in my head that I always say I picked up a lot from all these different jobs, but I really did, because I went from the bottom rung, bottom to, you know, somewhat closer to the top. So
was the car sales really competitive within the branch? That's the impression I always get.
Yeah.
Is that you're always like, no, me first.
Yeah. And I was the only woman. So that always makes for an interesting environment. But I feel like I earned their respect in a fairly quick manner. Whether I did or not, maybe it's all in my own head, but I did really well. But I do remember not understanding anything about data or KPIs or anything like that. And so I went to the monthly sales. You have a monthly sales meeting to review the previous month, and they're going through, and it was my first meeting like this, and they're handing out cash to the top people. And they're like, oh, you know, Bob, and here's Joe, and then they're like, oh, number one was Holly. Here's $1,000 cash. And I'm like, what? I had no idea. I was so clueless. I was just doing my job, you know, kind of enjoying talking to people, and like educating them about the different vehicles, and just doing what I was told at that point. And I couldn't believe it. And at that moment, I mean, that was a huge amount of money. It was just like, I think I spent it really frivolously too. It did not go in my bank account. It's like shopping, took my friends out for champagne. Like it was awesome. It felt really good. But it was enough of a eye opener to be like, oh, wow, okay, I should probably pay attention to the stats board that's up in the break room. And previous to that, it just didn't matter, because previous to that, I was just making people happy through their breakfast bagels and their cocktails. So, but now here I am, this is a performance-based occupation. And the sky's the limit. The harder I work, the more money I'm putting in my pocket. And obviously, growing up the way I did, money was very important to me, not because I wanted to be a baller, you know, it's not about that. Money to me equals stability. And that's what I craved and still crave in my life. I don't need to have a Mercedes outdoors. I don't need a Range Rover. I don't need any of that. I just want enough money to be creative, run my company, and feel stable.
You said something a moment ago I just want to touch on, which is that looking back now and kind of talking about all these jobs, you're saying how everything fits together in a really neat kind of story where you pick up these different skills, right? And it's really interesting. I kind of feel the same as well, that when you've gone through these things, they were just different opportunities that presented themselves. And you said yes and grabbed them with open arms. And you never really thought about how they connected together. It's only really when you look back with hindsight, you're like, oh yeah, well, in these places I learned how to do this. And I recognize now, like in the car dealership, all of a sudden objectives are really important because it's going to give me a bonus.
It's really interesting, as like Dean says, like looking back, that you could look back on it and say, right, I've got an ultimate goal where I want to be an entrepreneur. What do I need? Well, I need to be good with people. So I'll go and get some experience in retail. I need to understand finance. So I work my way through the bar to to manage the finances, or, I need some sales experience. Well, car showroom would be the great place to get that. But of course, that's not the way you've approached it. But it has given you a lot of the tools that I think you're probably going to end up talking about in a moment when we get a little bit more up to sort of present day.
This is going to be a book, you guys. Now that I'm actually speaking it out loud, I can tell you the skills I took away from the bagel shop, the bar, the car dealership. If I get in that mindset, it's really interesting. School of
There's
life.
a seminar, there's a program, there's a book.
Yeah.
Out of
it's
interest, through all of those roles so far, and we'll keep going as well and get to where you're at now. What do you think the biggest challenge was from all of those? Was there one that particularly stands out to you that was really hard to either pick up the skills, or you mentioned that hours were just the slog? What was the hardest thing through that period of your life?
Oh, goodness. I think it was just finding value in what I thought, the value between what I was doing, or the lack of value between what I was doing and what I thought I should be doing, was really difficult. I always thought I would do something, like we had talked previously, something with animals, or something maybe charitable or social work, or I just didn't picture myself selling cars. I mean, and also the stigma that comes with that isn't easy as a young woman trying to figure her life out. So I would say there was a lot of internal questioning of myself and trying to push through and build my self-confidence, because at the time I didn't understand how much I was learning, but I was learning a lot.
Eventually, you got into real estate. You ran a real estate business.
I did. I actually worked for a real estate developer in Boston. He was the largest developer historically that Boston had ever seen. His name was Harold Brown. He just passed just a couple of years ago. He was working up until he was 96.
Wow.
And he was the developer. I worked for this gentleman, Enrique, who was the kind of the in-house sales and marketing for the developer. And there was they had a lot of deals together, a lot of boys club deals happening that I wasn't privy to, but I was there to show up and sell the different buildings that they developed, which I loved.
I'm intrigued to know what other gaps did you fill between being at the car dealership and working for the real estate business? Is there anything in between there as well that you feel like added to your skill set?
I was a promotional model, which was basically liquor promotions, running around a bar, handing out shots. I'm not sure if that probably taught me what I didn't want to be doing. Right? That can get a little dicey, but it was interesting. And, another way where you're balancing, is this worth the money? I decided it wasn't for me. I worked at Dunkin' Donuts doing coffee for a while. I sold cell phones for Cellular One, which is a really long time ago. I don't even think there is Cellular One anymore. Oh my gosh, I know I'm forgetting one big one, and it'll come to me.
It's interesting what you're saying about the sort of model promotion bit, about realizing what you don't want to do. And again, in a number of episodes, I think that's come up, but also recently, a friend and I did a careers fair because these young people are stuck at home and they're not getting to do the work experience. So we got together a load of different people in different industries and just got them talking. And actually Dean came on and spoke about his role at Google. And one of the things that came out from lots of people about how they got to where they were was sometimes they didn't know what they wanted to do, but they definitely discovered over the years what they didn't want to do.
Yeah.
So it was kind of chalking off all of the options. I tried outdoors, that didn't work for me. I tried sales, that didn't work for me. And then, you get into places, you're working in the marketing department and not feeling that's right. And you suddenly discover there's this whole new department you never knew existed.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, well, that looks interesting. And you kind of work your way over as well. So I think, discovering what you don't want to do is an important process, right?
I agree very much so.
One of the interesting things for me in doing this podcast, and something that I think we wanted to highlight from putting it together, was how it is completely possible to change careers, or not even have a career as such, but have different jobs. And so over the long term, you could view it as a career because you've picked up all the different skills in these different places, but actually that it is completely okay to go back and forth from different sectors, right? To try new things, to fill a gap and do what you need to do for you or your family at any particular time, and then end up somewhere after maybe a bit of doing something you didn't really enjoy even, and then kind of land somewhere.
No matter what, you're going to take something away from it. You're going to learn from that, whether it's that you learn you love it or you hate it, right? And there's nothing worse than the unknown. I hate not turning over every rock. I want to know what's under each and every one of them, because that element of not knowing is something that will stay in my head, and probably many people's heads. So why not? If you can try it. Why not? What is there to lose?
That's awesome. So let's get back to real estate. You have picked up all these skills from selling cars, like working with customers and building these relationships in different, and it sounds like a few other kind of retail spaces as well. And it seems like you loved real estate. So tell us more about that job and how you got there and what you loved about it.
I think I loved it so much because I had complete control over my financial freedom, right? The more you sell, the more you make. And it's as simple as that. But more so, I got to tap into my creativity because it was working for a developer. So I would get to sit down at the design meetings and talk about granite and light fixtures and faucets and flooring and what was trending and what was sustainable and all of the aesthetic of the buildings, which of course just made me a better salesperson in the end, because I could say I was here from the beginning. This is why we chose this flooring. This is why we chose these appliances. And I loved having a say in that. And again, I was the only female within that whole crew. But it was kind of nice to be the only female because they when we were speaking about design, they would look to me and kind of lean on me to make some decisions, which I liked.
Because you mentioned creativity there and having a part in the creative process. Is that like that creative part? Is that something you've always kind of dabbled with throughout your time from a kid onwards, or is it something you started to discover? Okay, so it's always been there.
Yeah, I always had an artistic side for sure, whether it was just drawing or painting or I'm trying to think of some collages. I used to do lots of collages, which are now considered mood boards, but it wasn't that back then. I always had a creative side for sure.
Did you see the potential for your career going in that direction at any point, or had it always been something that kind of resided more as a hobby, an interest on the side?
Yeah, always a hobby, because I was constantly having that feeling of, always making sure I made enough money to sustain and keep my head above water, as opposed to being able to explore the creative side. Which was really, it's now looking back, it's really difficult because I think, had I not been so concerned about finances, what other creative endeavors would I have gotten into? But I'm very lucky that I found real estate because it gave me the financial freedom to dabble in more creative endeavors. Because I did work in real estate for the first 3 years of launching my company to fund it.
A perfect segue there into sort of what you're doing now. So I think it's probably fair timing to sort of talk about your endeavors now then. So during the real estate, you started dabbling around with what you do now, or a version of what you do now?
Yeah. So I was working with my childhood best friend. She had a company where she made these little ornaments out of sand from local beaches on Cape Cod. And it was really fun. And she's hyper creative and just wanted some help with the business side. So I was helping her with the business side of things. But then it got my creativity flowing. And we had decided, let's go take some jewelry classes. Like, what's the next step? An ornament is beautiful. People are loving it. We were selling a lot of them because they held sentimental value to the beach lovers on Cape Cod. So what was the next step above an ornament? And it was jewelry. So we started taking classes together, and ultimately she decided to stick with the ornaments, and I decided to launch my business, which is called Dune Jewelry. And essentially the premise is that we create tangible reminders of life's most precious moments. And what we do is we take sand and natural elements and we inlay it into different fine jewelry. We call it experiential jewelry. We actually trademarked that term because we capture experiences in every single piece. And so a good example would be like this necklace has sand from Positano, Italy. Not that anyone can see what I'm wearing right now. You guys can. But one of my favorite necklaces is a sun necklace, and it's filled with sand from Positano, Italy, where I went on my honeymoon. So every time I put that on, every time I touch it, every time I see it in the mirror or a photo, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's my honeymoon. You know, it brings back those feelings immediately, and it gives me an instant snapshot in my brain of being in Positano, in a pool, overlooking the cliffs, like those, you know, those beautiful Italian cliffs and all the colors and the ocean. And that's amazing, right? Because everything else right now is stuck in our phones, it's stuck in our computer, it's everything's digital. Whereas this is tangible, you're holding on to it. And I think that that's why it really resonates with people.
I think it's entirely the other end of the spectrum from the everyone sit down, I've got my holiday photos to show you moment that we see in some of those TV shows and things. I'm really fascinated by your business in that obviously sort of getting started with a creative idea presumably has loads of challenges of going from a place of security with a real estate job. When's that jumping off point when you feel like you need to go for it wholeheartedly?
I'll tell you, I know the exact moment. I had been working in real estate for 3 years, funding Dune Jewelry, and my husband was kind of I had gotten married. It's interesting. I got married in 2010, started Dune as a real business in 2010, although I had been making the jewelry for a couple of years previously as a hobby. And so in 2013, he said, listen, he's like, if you can't figure out how to teach other people how to make this jewelry, he's like, there's something wrong with you, because there are people who train people to perform brain surgery. So, and right there, it like clicked in my head that I had been so consumed with the creative portion of it and afraid that people wouldn't take it as serious as I did, or maybe they wouldn't create as beautiful jewelry as I did, or like I wouldn't be able to train them. And everything changed from that moment when I'm like, yeah, what am I doing? Like, let's do this. And so I left real estate and just started doing Dune full time, started hiring people, and it grew from there. I mean, pre-COVID, we had 28 full-time team members and over 40 sales reps all over the world.
It's pretty amazing to go from starting something on the side of a full-time job that you were doing into employing teams to create this jewelry with you and sell it. And I'm wondering how that felt at that moment after you had that conversation with your husband and you made that decision. How did it feel?
I think I was so inspired by the thought of not doing real estate. And it wasn't that I was sick of real estate or didn't like it, but he was like, this is your chance. Like, it's now or never. You can't continue doing both and doing both well. And he was right. So I was really energized, very, very inspired at the thought of it. And then things kind of fell into place. I know, Dean, you were saying that we tend to use the word luck a lot. Like, well, I was lucky about this, or I was lucky to meet this person. But I remember being at an arts and crafts show, super pregnant, sweating, and just like people probably felt bad for me. And I joked that they were just buying the jewelry because they felt bad. But I remember that's where my first sales rep found me. She kept walking back and forth and she was eyeballing everything. And I'm like, what? Just come ask me a question. If you have a question, come talk to me. But then eventually she did come over and she started understanding that it was all custom made to order, personalized jewelry that at that point, it just held sand from different beaches on Cape Cod. And she was like, oh my goodness. She's like, I could sell this to so many people. And it was like right place, right time. And she was my first sales rep. And so I've just learned everything along the way. I mean, luckily I did find a business mentor, because I'm not sure where I'd be at this point without a business mentor, because I, at that point, had the creative side down and was really starting to understand that and love that and excel at that. But I had no idea what a profit and loss statement was or what to do with one if I did know what it was. So luckily, I also got myself a business mentor.
Seems to me there are lots of questions with the business is in its infancy, where you've got sand from beaches local to you, which I can see that. To expand to where you've got now, where you've got bits of materials from across the world, like how you decide where you're going to sort of expand to, how you're going to grow that. I'm really fascinated by what processes you went through. What was the plan?
Well,
does it look anything like the plan now?
There was no plan.
Hey.
My biggest thing, and any of my team members will tell you, listen to your customers. Listen to your customers. Because if your customers aren't happy, you have no business, not in the jewelry industry. So they would call and they'd say, hey, I have a little rock from the Rocky Mountains. Can we crush it up and put it into something? Yes. Hey, I have lace from my wedding dress. Is there any way to put that in your jewelry? Yes. Even if I didn't know, I'd say yes, because I can try. Coal recovered from the Titanic. Flower petals from weddings, flower petals from funerals, ashes, not only from pets, but also humans. That's why we evolved from the original beach sand jewelry company into the one and only experiential jewelry company in the world, because we capture experiences in every single piece. Mostly good experiences, lots of first kisses and honeymoons and family vacations and childhood beach homes, but also ashes from loved ones or pets. It's wild. And I think it's so interesting as a business person, as a business owner, that in the beginning, for me, it was always with my team, we come from a place of yes. We say yes and we figure it out later. We say yes, 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 yes. But then you get to a point and you realize logistically, yes, you still want to say yes, but your business isn't going to be scalable if you're saying yes to everything. So you really have to kind of absorb that knowledge and have the humility to be like, okay, I've got to say no now, and everyone's going to look at me and be like, but you always say yes. You tell us to always say yes, but there's no way. Eventually, you have to start controlling the business and planning and figuring out what the next 6 months look like, 12 months, 24 months. And it's hard right now because we were on track to be over 5 million in revenue in 2020, which would have been our best year. And now I'm continuously looking at our budget thinking like, ooh, do I rewrite it at 50% of that? Do I rewrite it at 30% of it? I don't know, because COVID has deeply impacted our brick and mortar business, our wholesale business. You have to listen to your customers. They're going to take your business to a place of where it can be successful, right? If you're trying to control the narrative right away, which of course there are very successful businesses that do that. But for my business, that doesn't work. We're very emotional. We're very sentimental. We're just different than anything else out there. So
thank you for sharing about the current situation as well, because I can't imagine how it must feel at this point in time, just the uncertainty in the world anyway, let alone being a business owner that there is no way to predict what it's going to look like, right? It's hard to make that decision on what percentage of my budget do I actually commit to this year, because we've never been through this before. I'd love to come back to that in a moment as well. I just want to jump back very slightly. You mentioned scalability, and it feels like that first conversation that you had with your husband, he was basically saying to you, how are you going to scale this, right? You can't be up at all hours of the night making jewelry.
Yeah.
Are there any other, that seems to me to be the first kind of key point where you were like, okay, I'm going to grow this now. This is going to get bigger. Yeah. Are there any other really key moments where you felt like the business scaled in a big way? Or was it a pretty linear kind of growth from that point and you just gradually added a few more people to your team and moved onward?
I mean, I think COVID really had me looking at the business differently because every piece that goes out of our studio is handmade, personalized, and made to order. So when an order comes into my studio, it comes in, it goes to the admin, she prints it out, dates it for when it has to go out. She goes and pulls the sterling silver findings, goes and pulls the elements, so say mother of pearl and sand from Cornwall, right? And then passes it off to the artist. The artist creates it. It goes to packaging and QC, and they polish it and package it beautifully because it's custom packaged as well, because it's custom for you, and out the door. And I think we had been really toying with the idea that the wholesale business of Dune just really simply wasn't that profitable. But then I would rationalize it saying, you know what, it doesn't matter because it gives us so much brand awareness throughout the entire world, all through the Caribbean. That's okay, because eventually they're going to find our website, and our website is very profitable. And so I kind of let it go like that. But then once COVID hit and 70% of our revenue shut off because 70% was coming from brick and mortar, it was like, ooh, uh-oh. So I didn't rebrand. I did a brand refresh that'll be coming out September, which is our 10-year anniversary. And we changed from Dune Jewelry to Dune Jewelry & Co. With a little refresh on the logo. It's amazing. And we are adding a small experiential candle collection to the lineup that we can sell online. One smells like the Amalfi Coast, one smells like Cape Cod, one smells like the Outer Banks. So there's 10 of them all together. But in my mind, I'm like, okay, so we're the experiential jewelry company. Let's just try a small collection of experiential, like really high quality experiential candles that you can close your eyes, transport yourself. You've got your Amalfi Coast necklace on, you've got your candle burning, you've got a glass of red wine, Italian red wine, so it's like a little bit more immersive. But the reason I did that, so that's all the romance, right? Kicking back with your Italian red wine and the candle burning. But really, it was because if I get these candles made at the right price, suddenly I've got something in the studio that I can pick and pack and ship without touching 5 people in the studio, which of course then brings the profit margin down. So,
it sounds like COVID, as difficult as this situation has been, has almost given you the opportunity to take a step back and have a wider view of the business and kind of rethink the approach.
Yeah, 110%. And who knows if it's going to be successful or not? I know it will be. But I can't say that it is yet because it's not launched. We'll be launching that collection on our anniversary, which is September 28th. This is something that's going to affect us well through 2020 and into 2021. I would say by the end of 2021, I'll have a really good idea. I'll be back to having a solid idea of exactly where my business is at. But right now it's day to day and it's moment to moment and just trying to make the best decisions possible. Because I'm not going anywhere after 10 years. You know, this is my life's greatest journey. Like this Dune Jewelry, and I have children, and my husband's probably going to be like, "What the hell?" but Dune, for me, obviously professionally, is the greatest journey I've ever been on, and I can't wait to see where I can take it.
Well, I think it will be clear at this point to all the listeners that as passionate as you were about the bagel shop and real estate and all of the other and selling cars, like the level has risen when you started talking about your jewelry and the experiences. Because earlier on in the episode, you talked about that balance between doing something that feels worthwhile, or doing something that makes a bit of money. And it sounds like you very much. I mean, when you were talking about what those pieces mean to the people that you're making them for, that sounds like you're very fortunate to have something that really sort of hits you where it matters and also allows you to have a living as well.
It's unbelievable. And our customers are so loyal and amazing and giving, and they share their stories with us, and they tell us about how their mom cried, tears of emotion when they gave them this bracelet, on their birthday. And we're really lucky to be building this community of women and men that are just so giving in their storytelling and like sharing with us. Because if I didn't know about all the great reactions to people receiving it, I wouldn't know how special it was. So again, lucky, Dean. I'm lucky to have such great customers and fans, and it's a lot.
So does your social media play a big part in being able to see the kind of the fruits of your labor?
Yes. So, well, yeah, it does. In the beginning, it was Facebook, because this was 10 years ago, right? So Facebook was totally organic, and I got to speak to the customers every single day. Do you like this design? Do you like that design? Send me sand from here. If you like, there was just a constant conversation happening. Now it's very different, right? Instagram's great because we have so many beautiful visuals, but if you're brand new to Dune Jewelry, you're probably like, oh, that's pretty jewelry. You don't understand the sentimental value. So during COVID, my brand manager and I started doing this little segment called Kitchen Table Talks, because we were just back to making jewelry at the kitchen table during COVID. So I'm like, I am not shutting this business down. We'll just work from home. So we were creating from home, making the jewelry, shipping it all through Mother's Day. And then we started doing kitchen table talks where we really get to speak to our customers. And I think, again, a silver lining of COVID, people were bored and they were kind of like, all right, let's check this out. And so now we're getting an average of like 2,000 views on Facebook and 2,000 views or 1,500 views on Instagram. And we're kind of building upon that. So yeah, social media is huge for us as long as we prioritize it. I think for a long time, I was kind of like, make the jewelry, get it out the door, make the jewelry, get it out the door. And that was my priority. And it still is. And customer service, and we have a lifetime warranty and all of that. But social media has to be just as important, because there's no other way to get your brand message out there these days, especially with all the brick and mortar stores closed down.
I also noticed on your social media that at the beginning of the year, you did a fundraiser for the fires in Australia.
We did. We
just
raised a good amount of money too. We just jumped on that. I couldn't, again, animal lover, like the kangaroo photos and the koala photos really tore at my entire team was like, oh my God, what can we do to help? And the only way that we knew how to help was to try to raise some money and send it over and pray that things got under control. But we do a lot of charitable fundraising.
And the significant thing with that is, I think there's a big global of like recognizable event that, again, there's so many things we forgot about in 2020 because of COVID.
It doesn't. It feels like a lifetime ago that was happening. Yeah, I think unfortunately there is a lot of suffering. The human race is just suffering all over the world right now, and for so many reasons. And I mean, we've got to hope that this is a learning experience for some people, and that we can come out on the other side better people and more caring and giving and understanding, because otherwise what's it all for?
Well, I suppose you get an insight into those very special moments that people have and connect them to it for the rest of their lives, don't you, with the work that you do?
I love like reading the gift messages to different people. And I mean, some of them are so sweet. Some are so funny, like really, really cheeky messages, but then some are super emotional. And, but it's great to have that insight. Yeah. To be able to hear those people's thoughts and what they're feeling during this time. And for me, if I'm going to tell you anything, people are they're feeling sad, but hopeful. Everyone is hopeful. It's always like, I'm so sorry we're not going to see you this year, but can't wait till next year on the Jersey Shore, or can't wait to see you in St. John in 2021. Listen, if anything, we're resilient, right? As humans, we are resilient, and we're definitely going to get through this. And it's just a moment in time. It's just a very difficult moment in time.
Inspirational words. And there's a really interesting insight into the messages that you see as well. Holly, it's been amazing to hear about your story. And I just want to thank you for being so open throughout as well and sharing so much with us. So one final question to kind of finish us off then. And again, I really have loved hearing about how you built the business, what the business does. I think it's fascinating. We'll make sure we leave a link to Dune Jewelry, soon to be Dune Jewelry and Co. Down below. So definitely check that out. I just want to know, you found yourself on your own at a very young age, having to sustain yourself financially and figure out what it is that you wanted to do. You had a passion for animals. You found yourself in retail. You clearly worked really hard at everything that you ever tried to tackle. What's your biggest piece of advice to someone now who finds themselves maybe in a similar situation or is just trying to figure out what they want to do? If you could say one thing to them, what would it be?
I get, the one thing, be a good person, work hard, find something that you love, but also find something that there's a little bit of natural ability, right? Like if I had turned out to be a vet, everyone would be in trouble. I can't even dissect the frog in high school. So although you may be passionate about something, also look at it through some common sense eyes and make sure that it's something that you can do, that you're going to love doing, but that also you have some natural talent for, and then just go for it. There's no better time than right now. Don't wait.
Don't wait. I think 2 great words to end the show with today. Thanks again for all your time. I really hope that the business comes together. I love the new candle idea. And I know this has been a tough year on any retail business, actually, that's especially ones that operate in some way in the high street. And so I hope that you see continued success through 2021 and beyond as well.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Ben. So nice.
It's been a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much.